Hi everyone, Dr. Shook here. What I want to do is spend a few minutes and I want to explain to you how your body makes your thyroid hormone and how it's used by every cell in your body to stimulate your metabolism and all of your bodily functions that require thyroid hormone. The important thing to know about this entire process, I've already drawn it out to save us some time, is that there are really two different parts that we need to consider. You need to consider, can your body make thyroid hormone, and then you need to consider, can your body use the thyroid hormone that's already there. What I'm going to do is show you how it's made, and I'm going to go quickly so you can come back and watch this again if you want to. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you how this breaks down, okay, and the different ways that it can break down. So let's go ahead and we're going to get started, and we're going to talk about where this entire process begins. So it all starts here in the brain. And in the brain, you have a central structure in the brain called the hypothalamus. Okay, the hypothalamus will sense and detect whether or not your thyroid hormone levels are high or low. So if the thyroid hormone levels are low, the hypothalamus is going to make a hormone called TRH, or thyroid releasing hormone. Okay, TRH will stimulate a gland, also a brain structure, called the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is stimulated by the TRH, and it will put out and produce TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone. Now TSH is what's typically checked by your doctor. Okay, most people have TSH checked, and very rarely do they get the other hormones, which we'll talk about in a minute, checked. So they'll use this in a lot of cases to try to balance and regulate your thyroid hormone levels. And the way that they do that is, if your TSH is high, then their thinking is the brain wants the body to have more thyroid hormone, so it's pumping out and making more TSH. Okay, so if TSH is high, then the doctors think that you probably need more thyroid hormone, and they give you thyroid hormone. Okay, if your TSH is very low, then they'll either consider that you have Graves' disease or hyperthyroidism. And there's a few different reasons for that. But this is usually all they look at. Okay? So TSH, what TSH does is it stimulates the thyroid gland to manufacture and produce T4 and T3. Now T4 is 93% of the thyroid hormone that's made is T4. Okay? And then about 7% is T3, and that's the hormone that comes directly from the gland. Now what's important to know here is that T4 is primarily inactive in the body, and T3 is the active hormone. So it is what your body utilizes to stimulate the cellular physiology that you want, the metabolism, okay, the metabolism of the cell. So what happens is, when your thyroid makes T4 and T3, these hormones, sometimes on labs we will check total T4 and total T3, and we will check free T3 and free T4. And the difference is this: the free hormones are by themselves. They're free floating. The gland makes them, and they're just free floating in the circulation. The total hormone, when we check like total T4 and total T3, it's looking at those free floating hormones, plus it's looking at these hormones at the T3 and the T4. It's looking at them when they attach to these little things here. You see these little blue things? Those are thyroid binding globulins, or thyroid binding proteins. And what these little things do is they're kind of like taxi cabs for your thyroid hormone. Your body, what it will do is it will attach the T3 and T4 will attach to these thyroid binding proteins, and they will carry them to the cells where they're needed and drop them off so that they stimulate a response in the cell. Okay? So here's the thing. When these hormones are made, the T4 is inactive, and it has to be converted into T3. Okay? So what ends up happening is your body will produce the T4, and it will hop on these little binding proteins, and it will carry it primarily to the liver. There's a large percentage of it. The majority of your thyroid, the T4, is converted in the liver. Okay? Now some of it gets converted into T3 in the other tissues, but it primarily gets converted here. Okay? Now the T3 that's made, it just hops on these little binding proteins, and these binding proteins carry it to the cell. Alright, so it's ready to use. When it gets here, it detaches, comes off of the protein, and it goes into the cell, and it attaches to your DNA. It literally attaches to a little to a little receptor or a little docking station where it touches the DNA and it stimulates the DNA. And what the DNA does is you will have a proteomic response. It means that your body produces proteins, and there's the whole cellular mechanism is driven. Okay, that the proteomic response sets your BMR, basal metabolic rate, so the rate of metabolism. Okay, that's what your thyroid hormone does. It is essential for every single cell in your body. So we need more T3. This T4 has to be converted into T3. So that happens. These little proteins carry it to the liver. In the liver, of this T4 that comes here, okay, what will happen is about 60% of it, the T4 is converted into T3. Okay, just straight T3 like this. When the T3 is made, it hops into the circulation, gets a ride in the taxi cab or these binding proteins, carries it to the cell where it's used by the cell. Okay? Now another 20% will be converted into reverse T3. Okay, reverse T3 is inactive, but it's something that we need to look at on labs, and I'll explain when we talk about how this breaks down. I'll explain why that's relevant and one of the reasons it's important. And then another 20% of this T4 that comes in here gets converted into T3S, which is T3 sulfate, and T3AC, acetic acid. So these have to travel to the GI tract. And in the GI tract, this is supposed to be a cross-section of your GI tract. In the GI tract, this T3S and T3AC will get converted into T3. But you have to have adequate intestinal sulfatase. Okay, it's made by the bacteria. You have to have the right bacteria in the gut. Okay, so if you have an imbalance of bacteria, it can impair and cause problems with this process. And you have to have adequate stomach acidity. So hydrochloric acid, you have to have enough acidity for this conversion to occur. And I'm going to tell you right now that the number one cause of heartburn is not too much stomach acid. The number one cause of heartburn is what we call hypochlorhydria, or low stomach acidity. And I can explain that whole mechanism. I do other videos and where I explain just that. But I promise you that most people, they don't have heartburn because of too much acid. Even if you think you eat an acidic food and it causes heartburn, you can have ulcers and you can have a thin gastric lining. But typically, what we'll find is that when we support stomach acid, those symptoms go away. And a lot of people are taking antacids and other things that can be perpetuating and making the heartburn worse, and also causing problems here. So you've got to look at this entire physiology. Now we're not done. So if this T3 is made, hops into the bloodstream, when it's in the bloodstream, it will catch a ride on the thyroid binding globulin, the little taxi cabs, which carry it to the cells of the body that need it. Where it's dropped off, it stimulates the DNA. The DNA produces these proteins and drives your metabolic rate. Okay? This is the whole reason, right here, this process is why we need the thyroid hormone. Okay? The entire purpose. So this is the physiology here. Okay, this is how it's made, beginning to end. When your doctors check you out, what do they look at? They look at TSH, and they might look at T3 and T4. Okay, I'm gonna tell you that is who cares if if you have the quantity and you have the hormones? Can you use it? Can your cells actually use it? Let me show you how this process breaks down. Okay, so let's start in the brain. Okay. So in order for the hypothalamus to make thyroid-releasing hormone, to trigger the pituitary gland to make TSH, you have to have serotonin, which is a brain neurotransmitter, and you have to have dopamine. So serotonin and dopamine, those are neurotransmitters, brain chemicals. You have to have adequate central nervous system serotonin and dopamine to make thyroid-releasing hormone. Okay, so just to make that. So if you don't have enough serotonin and dopamine, you might not make enough TRH. Okay, so there are different patterns we can identify on blood work to help us figure out what's happening. And then, so you have to have that. Now, for TSH to be made, for the thyroid-stimulating hormone to be made, you have to have adequate protein, magnesium, zinc, and B12. You have to have enough protein, you have to have enough magnesium, B12, and you have to have zinc. If you don't have those things, you can't make your TSH. Okay, so these are nutrients, right? So we're going to go through all these processes. Now, when we get into the thyroid, okay, in the thyroid, for your thyroid, inside the thyroid, you have to have TPO and thyroglobulin. Okay, now TPO is thyroid peroxidase. This is thyroglobulin. Okay, this is a protein, thyroglobulin. TPO is thyroid peroxidase. These are essential for the manufacturing of your thyroid hormones. Now here's the deal. If you have Hashimoto's, these are what we check. We check to see if you have TPO antibodies, which means that your immune system's attacking the TPO, and we look to see if you have thyroglobulin antibodies to see if your immune system's attacking thyroglobulin. So here's what happens. If you have Hashimoto's, your body's attacking one or both of these, okay? So if your immune system is destroying TPO and it's destroying thyroglobulin, and these are required to make T4 and T3, okay, then do you think you're going to have, your thyroid's going to have a great capacity or normal capacity to make thyroid hormone? No. But if it's being attacked and it's being destroyed by the immune system, and by the way, this is the most common reason for thyroid symptoms. If you have hypothyroidism, okay? If you have a low thyroid, hypothyroid, you have a 90% chance of one of these things to be occurring with you, okay? 9 out of 10 is what some of the literature shows us that are the chances that you're going to have an autoimmune thyroid problem contributing to dysfunction here. So let me ask you a question. Should you just take more thyroid hormone? Is that the answer? Well, that might help you, but wouldn't it be good if you could stop your immune system from attacking your body abnormally? I mean, it's not normal for your immune system to attack you. That's called autoimmunity, okay? This process, this is what I work with all of this with my patients that come in with thyroid dysfunction. We look at all these things to see what we can identify. But this is an immune system problem. It's not even a thyroid problem. It's the immune system attacking the gland. You have to address the autoimmunity to dampen or try to put this into remission so that you can stop this process. If you can do that, then a lot of times the thyroid physiology and function can improve and even normalize. Okay, so this is extremely important, and it's being missed in the majority of people. Okay, now the next thing is not only do you need these two enzymes and this enzyme and this protein, you also need iodine, B12, vitamin C, and you need tyrosine. These are again nutrients, vitamins, and minerals that are essential to the manufacturing of your thyroid hormone. Now you have to be cautious. I'm cautious about iodine. I do not recommend any of my patients to supplement with iodine unless I know that they are not autoimmune. I definitely don't recommend high-dose iodine. Maybe the amounts that are in some multivitamins might be okay, but you cannot be deficient in selenium. Selenium has been shown to be a protective mechanism, and selenium deficiencies may be associated with autoimmune thyroid conditions. So we look for all of these deficiencies. You've got to look to see, are you deficient? What do you need? Can you produce? If you have this stuff, then you should be able to produce thyroid hormone. Okay? Now, when you get to this point, you can measure your T4 and your T3 and you can see, is the thyroid hormone quantity there? If it's there, if all this is normal and you still have symptoms, then here's the thing. You could very easily have a problem getting this hormone into the cell. Okay? Let's talk about how that could happen. Because, quite frankly, this is a very, very common problem, what I'm getting ready to talk about. These are very common amongst my patient population and most people that have thyroid issues. So here's how it goes. So the T4 and T3, remember, they have to hitch a ride on these little taxi cabs, right? So what ends up happening is the T4 has to be converted to T3. Now, where does most of that happen? Most of it happens in the liver. So when the T4 gets to, well, let's talk about these binding proteins first, okay? So some people will actually, and I see this most commonly in women, and most commonly in women that are either taking birth control, they're on a hormone replacement therapy, or they just have poor liver function or a fatty liver. What happens is they're either taking estrogens or their liver is impaired, so they're not breaking down and clearing estrogens from their body at the rate that they should. So what ends up happening is they have increased estrogens in their body, and what that will do is that will cause the amount and number of these little thyroid binding globulins. Remember, these are the taxi cabs. They carry the hormones to the cell and then drop them off. Those estrogens will cause the number of these things to increase, okay? So it causes these things to go up in number. And when that happens, they basically hold on to all the thyroid hormone and they don't let it go for for the cell to use it. So it's there, but it's all stuck in the taxi cab, and the driver won't let it out. Okay, won't let it go. So the quantities are normal, but you cannot use it. So what I look for is I look for T3 uptake. Okay, we can just T3 uptake. This is one of the markers, and T3 uptake will be low, or it will be near. It will be near the bottom of the lab range. Typically, it's around 27 or below is usually when I start suspecting this. Okay, it just depends on the history and what some of the other markers look like. T3 uptake. Okay, T3 uptake here. These numbers go up. So what do you have to do? You have to either look at the hormone at the hormones that they're taking and say, hey, is this something that's absolutely necessary? Or you have to support the liver so that the liver can break down the estrogens and clear it out. And sometimes you have to do all those things. Sometimes these can be driven by other issues like blood sugar fluctuations. Okay, so this is getting more detailed. But so here's the thing. Increased estrogens, poor liver function could drive up the thyroid binding globulins and cause a problem with you just being able to get the hormone into the cell. Okay? Now, in the liver, T4 comes to the liver. Remember, the majority of the hormone made, 93% is T4, it's inactive. So it has to be converted if your body's going to have enough T3. So it comes to the liver, it gets converted, like we said, to T3, reverse T3, T3S, and T3AC. Now, what do you have to have? You have to have selenium, you have to have iron, you have to have proteins to make this conversion happen. So if you're deficient in selenium, these conversion processes are very inefficient, so you may not convert properly. So what I'll do is I'll look at labs and I'll look to see, well, is T4 normal? If T4 is normal, what's T3 look like? If the T3 is on the lower end of normal or if it's lab low, there's things we've got to consider. Why isn't this conversion happening? Is it a deficiency? What else could be happening there? And if you're selenium deficient, what will happen is a lot of times, if you're selenium deficient, the reverse T3 goes up because your body's still trying to convert it, but it shifts from converting T4 to T3, which is what you want, to converting that T4 into reverse T3, and you'll see it go up. You'll also see that go up with inflammation and some other things. So the liver is very important, right? You can't have a fatty liver and be deficient in vitamins and minerals and have all these issues and expect to have normal thyroid function. So the answer is not going and just getting a replacement therapy. That might be necessary, especially in the short term, but are you considering, your doctors, do they know this? Okay, and it's been my experience that very, very few understand this in this detail. And I didn't understand that until I started studying this in greater detail and had the opportunity to learn from some very, very bright doctors. And so, this is where we are. Liver here, now this goes, the T3S and AC, remember, this is about 20% of the T4 gets converted into these forms that go to the GI tract. In the GI tract, for these to be made into T3, you got to have intestinal sulfatase, good bacteria, and adequate stomach acidity. Okay, so those are some of the primary ways that your body will take T4 and make T3. Now, once you have T3, it gets in the bloodstream, hitches a ride, goes to the cell. At the cell, it attaches to the DNA. The DNA is stimulated. You have what they call a proteomic response, and then you have your basal metabolic rate increases. The rate of metabolism, cellular activity increases. Now, this receptor where the T3 attaches to stimulate the DNA is vitamin A and vitamin D dependent. So here's the deal. If you're deficient in vitamin D, which I don't see anyone in my practice that's not supplementing that has adequate vitamin D ever. Now, vitamin A, we don't test that very frequently, but I'm going to tell you right now, these are fat-soluble vitamins. Okay, so there's water-soluble vitamins, they're fat-soluble vitamins. Fat-soluble vitamins are A, D, E, and K. Okay, so if it's fat-soluble, it has to be absorbed with fat. So I'm going to tell you a few things. If you don't eat enough fat, you're not going to absorb these. Okay, so for one thing. Now, if you have poor digestive function, you have a bad digestive tract, irritable bowel, inflammatory bowel, celiac disease, other types of digestive issues. If you have enzyme deficiency, your gallbladder enzymes, your pancreatic enzymes. If you have low stomach acidity, these are all things that can contribute to malabsorption or poor absorption in the GI tract. And even if you have fat that's in your GI tract, if you can't absorb well, you'll be deficient in these vitamins. Okay, so they have to absorb with fat. They have to be. That's why a lot of these, if you buy a supplement, they're immersed in a fat base. So You have to have those for that DNA receptor to work and be sensitive. Okay? So you have to consider this entire physiology. Now, I want to mention a few other things. There are three things that are very common that will disrupt this physiology as well. So, number one, we're going to have inflammation. I'm just going to write INF, okay? Inflammation will drive up inflammatory chemicals called cytokines. Okay, cytokines are inflammatory messenger chemicals. Okay, they're produced in an inflammatory state. So, and a lot of different things drive inflammation. So, what will happen is if you have high inflammation, it will create receptor resistance. So, all of your hormones, not just thyroid, the cell is less sensitive to it. So, you don't have the same stimulatory effect because of the inflammation. Now, number two, cortisol. Okay, cortisol is your stress hormone. And listen, your cortisol will create a very similar type of problem. It'll create issues with the receptor. It will impair conversion. It will do numerous things. It will disrupt blood sugar. It will break down your barrier systems, your blood-brain barrier, your lung barrier, your GI tract barrier. So cortisol is another major problem that will disrupt this physiology. It will actually can impair some of the neurological mechanisms here that are responsible for these feedback for these hormones that are produced. Cortisol and inflammation can both cross the blood-brain barrier and disrupt your neurological signaling. Okay, and then number three is stress. And when we talk about stress, listen, when you're under stress, chemical, physical, and emotional stresses, because there's all kinds of stresses, what that does is, for one thing, you'll produce cortisol, but you put your body into a fight or flight mode. And when you're under stress, your body has this involuntary nervous system. Okay, so my arms being able to move, that's voluntary. All right, the involuntary nervous system is what runs all of my chemical processes. It's what allows my body to function. I don't even think about it. Right, I don't know how to digest. My body just digests my food. So, but that is called your autonomic nervous system, and it has two divisions. It has sympathetic and parasympathetic. The sympathetic system is known as the fight or flight system. The parasympathetic is known as the rest and digest system. When you're under stress, you will be primarily sympathetically dominant. So your fight or flight system is more dominant. You do not rest and digest. It does not carry out a lot of your other bodily functions of recovery if you're stuck in that fight or flight mode. Okay? That is, stress will do that. That will promote this process. And so you have to work on the body. What you have to do is you have to look at what's happening with the person, and you try to make the least amount of change to that person's environment, to their diet, to whatnot, to improve all of this as much as you can. So where we start is we start with diet. That's the number one place, and then we try to incorporate some lifestyle things in here as well. This big mess of all these problems, this is exactly why I created the Hashimoto's Transformation Program, the 6-week Hashimoto's Transformation Program, so that I can start people at a foundational approach and look, this is what causes thyroid dysfunction. Not a deficiency just here. Okay, that's not it. It is all of this, all of these potential problems. And that's why I created that program, so that you can, listen, if you want help, I'll be happy to do blood work and work you up and go through this with you. But there's an issue. It's called time and money. It's a lot of my time, and it's an investment in your health. And I think no matter what it costs, it's worth to figure this stuff out. But there's a place that you could consider starting, and that's with a program that walks you through how to change diet, consider nutritional supplementation for your systems, and then what we do is we give you a group, and we allow you to get access to me and my staff on a preferential basis, so that we can answer questions and help you through this process. Try to help you yourself, so that you don't have to necessarily seek out my help or another someone that's qualified to help you with these types of problems. But that's why I've created the programs, and I try to educate people, because this is really what's going on. Okay? I hope this has been helpful. I hope it hasn't been overwhelming, but please go back, listen through this, look at all the places this can break down. Okay? If you have questions, let me know. Okay? I'll do anything I can do to help you. But I appreciate you taking time to learn more about your health. I think that this is important that everyone know this. Your doctors need to know this. I've learned this from some very brilliant doctors, and it's I feel compelled that it needs to be taught, and you know, your doctors, everyone's trying to help you. All right, I wanted to share this with you guys, and again, I appreciate you taking time to learn more about your health. If there's anything that we can do for you, just let us know.